It got much worse for the Boston Bruins. After years and years of saying the end is finally near, the Boston Bruins have collapsed in an incredible way, not only losing horribly to the Columbus Blue Jackets in a game that can honestly just be described as laughable, getting booed off their own home ice. They fired their head coach, Jim Montgomery, who had the best record in the NHL since he took over in 2022. Plus, the star players, some guys making a lot of money, putting up numbers that, once again, are just, for what they make, really bad. We got to dive into all of these things and the final collapse of the Boston Bruins coming up on this episode of Hat Trick HQ. But before we get into the video, a reminder to all the new viewers that 91% of you watching this video are not subscribed. If you want daily NHL content, some days like today, like yesterday, we got multiple videos coming out every day on all things NHL, and there's going to be probably some more Bruins content as we move forward. So hit the button down below. It's completely free. It'd help us out. Mark, Darius, look, I know we are fans of different teams. We got some Habs, we got some Canucks, and we got some Leafs representation here right now. So maybe we'll be biased one way or another. So if you're not a Bruins fan, or if you are, I want to hear your thoughts on this whole situation down below. But let's just talk about this. The most recent bit of news as the recording of this video was the Jim Montgomery firing, and Don Sweeney announced they relieved him, and Joe Sacco will assume interim head coaching duties. But it's not just this. This paints a broader picture. A lot of things have led up to this. They're a team who has a horrible plus-minus. Their top players are just not producing. They're 31st in goals per game, 28th in goals against, last place power play, 25th place penalty kill. Mark, I'll start with you. I mean, we knew this time was coming eventually, but to hear that Montgomery is fired, they're turning this leaf, it seems, despite having a bunch of anchors of contracts. This does not paint a pretty picture for Boston.
Yeah, I mean, looking at this Boston team coming into the year, I was not expecting them to go out and be almost the worst virtually in every stat. This was a team where you look at Jim Montgomery and he seemed like the perfect coach and, quite frankly, one of the best coaches in the NHL. I mean, looking at stats dating back to when he was signed here in 2022, he has the most wins with 120, most regulation wins with 95, highest winning percentage with 71.5%. The Boston Bruins looked awesome with Jim Montgomery, and I don't think he was the root problem list. Yes, they had a bad start. Yes, they're looking like a shell of themselves. They're a minus 21 right now, which is the worst in the Eastern Conference, and they're in a conference with the Habs, so that is saying something. But Darius, looking at this, do you think moving Jim was the right move?
No, I don't think that this was the right move because I don't think it's Jim Montgomery's fault. And I think he's one of the best coaches in the National Hockey League. And one team in the National Hockey League just got better because he's going to get hired pretty soon by a team that's going to fire their coach. And there's a couple of teams that could be on the way there as well. So I don't think it was the right move. I think that he's a great coach. And if you look at the team's roster and I mean, maybe you can chalk up some of the special teams things to coaching, but if you look at the roster, they're dealing with maybe 1, 2, or 3 injuries, I guess, right now, if you include the blue line. But to have Justin Brazeau on your second line, like, you are not going to find success. And for the last couple of years since Bergeron has retired, they do not have a number one or a bona fide number one center. They have a couple of guys who are playing there, but they don't have a bona fide number one center. So the personnel, the team, I was expecting them to kind of, drop off a little bit as time went on because obviously guys like Marchand are getting older, right? But this is disastrous. Like their numbers this year, I'm surprised they are where they are still in the Atlantic, which is pretty surprising, but their numbers are disastrous. Like the special teams are terrible. And even 5-on-5, like there's a couple silver linings, but they have been pretty brutal this season. And again, if you look at the personnel, it's just not a team that's built to win. And, you have a couple pieces there, like goaltender, and I wanted to get into that as well. Josh, I don't know what your thoughts are on that. Swayman, obviously, that whole debacle in the offseason, and then he hasn't been good to start this season.
Well, I mean, I've heard some rumblings. It's been out there that some players, some veteran players, might not be super happy with Jeremy Swayman. Now, this is not a report from me. I've heard these rumblings from other people, so don't take it from me. I believe, I don't know, Friedman kind of implied it. Anyway, there's some stuff going on around Swayman. Some people not sure if that locker room situation is great after him holding out, and he has just not been good this season. He has said, though, I believe it was just today, he's like, I need to do better, and I will do better. And I honestly do believe he will do better. Like, the team in front of him just hasn't been performing, and if we look at those defensive pairings, they're not doing him any favors. I mean, Esterly, much older than I think people realize. Charlie McAvoy is still great, but Brandon Carlo and Mason Lohrei, like, Lohrei is not a second pairing defender. Then you got Zadorov making $5 million a year. Your third pairing is making 7.75, and Zadorov has just been really not good. So they're not doing Swayman any favors either. But, like you said, there are some silver linings on this team. Like, one of the better lines in the NHL in terms of expected goals for is a line that has a couple of injured players, and Kepke, Pastrnak and I think it was Frederick as well, or maybe Beecher. But still, there's a couple of guys who have been doing good with their limited minutes. But overall, if we bring up the stats of their top producers right now, it does not paint a pretty picture, right? You got Pastrnak, 8 goals in 20 games. I'm sure that will pick up. He's been their top scorer this year, but the contracts of guys like Lindholm, my gosh, putting up only 9 points in 20 games, locked up until 2031. Him and a guy like Zadorov are the two main guys that Bruins fans, I don't even want to use the word scapegoat because I don't even think that's what it is. I think it's just straight up disappointment so far this season. Yes, there's time to turn it around, but I'm also in agreement that I don't think Montgomery's the reason they're not producing. I don't think these were like, I mean, the Zadorov one was a bit more questionable. I know, Mark, you have a bit more experience with Nikita Zadorov, and well, both these guys a little bit. We'll throw that to you there in a second, but like, I don't know. Like, part of me is like, I just don't think it's Montgomery's fault, but I also don't think these signings were necessarily the problem, though they do look a little questionable in hindsight, and it's kind of handcuffing them for the future.
Yeah, I mean, looking at these two signings, the first one being Elias Lindholm, the Canucks did acquire him from the Flames, and Lindholm was a player that was quite frustrating to watch, is the best way to put it. He was a guy that would be in this lineup, and you would look at him some games and say, hey, this guy looks awesome defensively, and it looks like he can't do a thing offensively. Lindholm is a good player, but I think with the cap hit just coming in under $8 million, he's going to be 36 at the end of this deal, as it's year 1 of 7. This is going to be hard to bite, especially if he's having a low production season already in year 1. You still have 6 more years at him. Zadorov was another guy. Listen, when he was on the Canucks, I loved this guy. I thought he was an awesome playoff performer, but he got quite a few scratches during the regular season with the Canucks, which led to a cap hit of $5 million, paying a guy that could be your 5th, 6th, maybe 4th defenseman. Is a hard bullet to kind of swallow. I mean, this guy coming in, he's a big defenseman. He can be a turning point in the playoffs. But the regular season is going to be hard to get through, especially when you have 5 more years at his size, 6'6", 250 pounds. He's going to slow down with age. Zadorov could come around, but I do think having these two contracts kind of hinder. You can't really build a lot with this team. You do have roughly $6 million going into trade deadline to help build this team a bit. But overall, having these contracts on are not really helping them. Darius, looking at this, do you think the Bruins are ever going to be sellers, or do you think they're just going to try to add pieces to their current core?
I think they're going to have to try and add, unfortunately. I mean, when you look at hindsight's 2020, right? And I mean, when you look at all these signings, it's looking like a disaster so far. Zadorov is playing on, third pairing minutes. He's making $5 million. Like, that is not a recipe for success. Lindholm at the time, I mean, at least how I felt, the narrative in the summer was, wow, the Bruins have retooled. They've done a great job retooling here. They have a second line center, but they still don't have a first line center, right? And Zadorov, I don't know if his skill set lends to playing top 4 anyway on any team, but for some reason, he got that significant pay raise. And the other thing that, not too many people are talking about, and I haven't seen so far, and again, the firing is very recent, but they don't even have a new voice. This is an associate coach that's just taking over, right? I think that's something that they don't really have a plan. I think that's something that I would be concerned about if I was a Boston Bruins fan, because, okay, Montgomery is not the answer. We need a new voice in here, but the voice that you're replacing him with was already in the room. I think that's puzzling, and I'm not sure where they go from here, because I don't think you can sell, especially with those contracts just starting. They're going to have to probably add, and it just seems like the vibes are off. Josh, I don't know how you feel about that, but I just feel like not enough has changed and they don't really have a plan.
I mean, for now, my interpretation is that Sacco is probably not going to be that permanent replacement. So we'll see who comes in and when. I don't know. Maybe it'll be this season. Maybe it'll be next year. We hear Gerard Gallant's name always thrown around. I mean, his name's always going to be in the ring. And honestly, I think in terms of a new name, it might make some sense. We'll have to see. But right now, no, I think you're bang on. And the Lindholm thing, I think is just so weird, right? I think there is lots of time for him to bounce back, but also we got to mention like Coyle has taken a bit of a step back over the past. He's had some solid seasons. He looked like a guy that could fill in as that like 1C maybe. But like now you got like Zacha and you got Lindholm, and it's not quite clicking on that level. Castellic has been one of your better players down the middle in terms of advanced stats. But one thing I wanted to mention as well, I think you got a great point about getting a new voice. And I also think you're bang on with the fact that they can't be sellers because no team is going to buy those contracts unless the Bruins pay a ton in terms of draft capital or prospects for another team to take them on. But that leads to my other problem, prospects. The Bruins have consistently over the past number of years have had one of the most limited prospect pools in the NHL. And that's one of the problems with being so great for so many years is that you just don't really get that many high draft picks, but still you expect him to develop a bit. And sure, you got Swayman, like that guy's, was awesome. But at the same time, like having not much to come up behind you in order to like even get rid of your albatross contracts hurts a little bit too. Darius, I'll throw it back to you, and I just to switch up the direction a bit. I don't know. At this point, like, how much focus do you think Boston should do? We talked a bit about this in the Nashville video because they're in like a somewhat similar situation with a bunch of big contracts who are not performing very well, very limited prospect pool. At this point, do you think a new voice will even be enough for the Bruins? Or at some point, do you think like this got to be a complete teardown from the bottom up? Just stack whatever you can in terms of draft capital. You eat these contracts. You maybe look to buy them out in a couple of years. I know it's way too early, I think, to be talking about this. But if this continues, is that really potentially an option that we might have to look towards?
I didn't think that a rebuild would be in the works for the Boston Bruins.
No.
Honestly, didn't. I thought that the mentality was definitely there. They won 60 games 2 seasons ago. I thought the mentality, no matter who comes through the door, it seemed like the culture and the mentality was there that you're going to work hard and you're going to win hockey games. So I never thought that that was on the table. The way they're playing this season, I think it's definitely on the table because notoriously, especially over the last maybe 10 years or so, they cannot draft. They don't really draft well, especially the high rounds, I would say. Sometimes you'll get a gem here and there and they'll make the lineup. But I think that they have to focus on the draft now. I think, I don't even want to use the term retool. I think they really have to focus on getting younger and, starting the whole thing over because Brad Marchand, his time in Boston might be up, right? Maybe he signs another short-term deal, but he's older now. So you have to start to turn the page. I think they were getting a little bit comfortable, especially winning 60 games a couple of years ago. And they're going to have to start turning the page here pretty quickly. Mark, I don't know how you feel about that, but I think it's time possibly for a rebuild in Boston. I think they rode the wave a little bit too long.
I mean, looking at Brad Marchand, I'm glad you brought him up. This is a guy that's named captain. I feel like ever since Bergeron left this team, the Bruins never really had that kind of bite to their game. Yes, they did have some good series. They've won 60 games in the season. But losing Bergeron seemed like that one piece that kept everything together. Yes, Brad Marchand is an incredible player, but maybe a new captain could be in the works. I don't think they're going to strip Marchand unless he's moved or retired. But Josh, do you think even a new just kind of voice from assistant captains or captains would help with this team?
I think it could help. I think it's yet to be seen. I think there's a lot of stuff that we're saying right now that might look really stupid in 2 weeks. I think this team has so much talent and they're probably still going to be running the same system they were under Montgomery. So we're just going to have to wait and see how this performs. But at the very least, I think if they want to spark this team, a new voice is one of those things that has proven time and time again in the NHL to get a team going, or even just something crazy coming from the coaching staff. We all know what happened in Nashville after they couldn't go to their concert, right? Little things like that can sometimes play well on the team. But I want to hear all your guys' thoughts down below. Are you a Bruins fan or are you a Bruins hater? Maybe like the three of us. We want to hear your thoughts because some of you probably really agree. Some of you probably hate everything we said. And I'd love to see all that conversation, I guess, down below in the comments. But that'll do it for this episode of Hat Trick HQ. If you want to stay up to date on all things NHL every single day, hit the subscribe button down below. It would really help us out, and it helps you keep up to date on the NHL news. I'm Josh Gosse, my co-hosts, Mark and Darius. We'll catch you in the next one.